A look back at 2014, an interview with Kevyn Orr, a tribute to Congressman Dingell and Senator Levin, and Governor Snyder's agenda for the next year. Grab some eggnog. MiWeek starts right now.
Recently, Michigan's economy has begun to turn around. Michigan's gained over 250,000 new jobs. We've paid off $20 billion in long-term debt. And our population is increasing for the first time in a decade. But to make Michigan a top 10 state, there's still plenty of work to be done. Step up and help put Michigan on top. Learn what you can do at MichiganTurnaroundPlan.com.
Funding is also provided by Delta.
Welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. Merry Christmas. We hope that you're enjoying the holiday with your family. Tonight, we're going to take the opportunity to look back at quite a year in Michigan, from pivotal elections to Detroit coming out of bankruptcy to debates over education and a slowly improving economy. There was no shortage of news in 2014, so tonight a look back at how Detroit's bankruptcy got done with Kevyn Orr. Plus, the legacy of Senator Carl Levin and Congressman John Dingell. Also, Governor Snyder maps out his next 4 years with us and what's ahead in 2015 with our MiWeek contributors Nolan Finley and Stephen Henderson. But first, former Detroit Emergency Manager Kevyn Orr. He led Detroit through the biggest Chapter 9 in history, and he did it in record time. His parting words for the city: never forget what got you here in the first place. MiWeek contributor Stephen Henderson recently interviewed Orr and takes a look back at the bankruptcy.
Let's talk about the grand bargain. I've never seen anything like that.
Neither have I.
In a private bankruptcy
Yeah.
or a public bankruptcy. Of course, there aren't that many public bankruptcies to compare it to, but the
Right.
idea of $700–800 million from parties that had nothing to do with the case coming in to try to settle it, that's it's still something I can't quite get my mind around how that happened.
Stephen, I think people need to take a step back and realize how unique and unprecedented and crucial that was. If you recall, in April 2013, we had invited Christie's in to do an appraisal of DIA, and then there was your paper and others. There was an explosion of news, and I asked Christie's to go away for 3 months, and they did that at some risk to themselves. They lost some commissions. I mean, they lost business. They're in business. They lost business for doing that. But eventually the team came to me in August and said, you know, we're not going to be able to propose a plan by the beginning of the new year, and we're losing time in your tenure if you don't do it, so we invited them back in. At that time, my thinking was, you know, if I don't find a way, and I said all throughout the summer, DIA has to help itself, has to help itself. And we had interviews that time, and I kept saying that. And my thinking at the time was, you know, if we don't find a solution to this thing, I may have to, the fancy word in the art world is DSS. You know, in my neighborhood, we call it a yard sale, right? And I'm going to have to sell some of this stuff to get some value in, because I'm a fiduciary and I can't let valuable assets just stay on the shelf.
You got to rationalize it.
I got to rationalize it in some way. So Judge Rosen, Miriam Nolan, Darren Walker, Rip Rapson, Hanya Allen, others.
The foundation community.
Foundation community, 50 of them, never been done before, at a $125 million, largest single commitment. And most foundations, they all have different creeds and theories. Most foundations do philanthropy, not charity. You know, they seed money to get money back. This was, in a sense, help without that sort of a creed. Never been done before. That freed us from having to sell the art museum or pieces of it, become pariah in the art community. I think the New York museums took a vote amongst they'd never do business with DIA again if they de-assessed anything, all that. So that was really crucial. But more importantly, we were able to take that money, specifically dedicated, including a state contribution, because now the governor was able to go to the legislature. And I'll tell you, we're up there in May of this year. The legislators were very angry, saying not one dime for tribute. You recall that vote was 107 to 5, I think it was. Eventually, we're able to say, if the foundations can do this, we have to kick in as well. That was pretty crucial. That was a turning point.
Yeah. What would the bankruptcy have looked like without that money? Outside the art museum, which clearly would have been vulnerable, what would it have looked like for retirees, for instance?
We had it in the plan. There was option A and option B, not just in their vote, but that was our option. That's what the plan proponent, meaning the city, had. If we had not gotten that money from DIA, and you'll recall for most of the bankruptcy, even with that money, we were being told we were short and that you had to sell, and we had investors from overseas coming in and proposing, you know, $4 billion in assets to hang it in different provinces overseas. Without that money, I don't think we would have had a very good case to argue that we're not going to do anything with DIA.
Right.
So it would have been a lot messier. Frankly, without being able to show that there's value for the Art Institute, and so therefore we can preserve it, we would have been in a much more difficult situation with our creditors, for whom we borrowed $1.5 billion, but worse than that. In conjunction with the cops, we entered into the swap transaction, $450 million. Worse than that, DWSD paid $542 million in 2011 and 2012. Between the years 26 and 2012, this city either obligated or paid $2.5 billion.
Right.
And we're going to say to our creditors, we're not going to give you a dime?
Yeah.
That's not
It
going to
wouldn't
work.
have worked.
That wouldn't have worked.
Right.
And that's not good faith.
Great information on what really happened in the whole bankruptcy process. You can see the entire interview with Kevyn Orr on American Black Journal coming up this Sunday, December 28th at 12:30 p.m. Well, it was a year of political change as well. 4 longtime and influential members of our state's congressional delegation announced their retirements. Congressman John Dingell served almost 60 years in Washington. He's the longest-serving congressman in history, the Dean of the House. And Senator Levin retiring after 35 years, making him the state's longest-serving U.S. Senator. No matter where you stand politically, these men have served Michigan most of their lives and leave an amazing legacy. This fall, the two were honored with the Shining Light Regional Cooperation Awards, and this tribute was produced by the Detroit Free Press for those awards.
Congress is the servant of the American people. This is the government of the United States, which is the greatest government in the history and the greatest nation in the history of mankind. I made the choice of public service way back when I got out of the Army. I did it in large part because of Dad, who cared greatly about government. We remade the country with the Civil Rights Bill. And had it not been for that, I shudder to think what would have happened in this country.
What he did as chairman is what I've tried to duplicate now for me as chairman, and that is ideas win. Policy wins over politics.
I found if you run this place or run a committee according to the rules of the Founding Fathers, you can do it fairly and openly.
Our hearing room now is named the John D. Dingell Hearing Room. That's going to stay forever because of the legacy that he leaves here after serving 60 years. By the way, that mark will probably never, ever be again.
All right, I'm going to hop on my cart and go across and do my voting.
John followed in the tradition of his dad, and Sandy and I have followed in the tradition of our dad, fighting for what is long overdue in this country, helping people overcome injustice and poverty.
And I know as a civil rights attorney, he had a tremendous passion. He still has a tremendous passion for the law, for justice, for doing what's right. And he's brought that passion into the arena of the United States Senate. He's the thoughtful person in the room on defense policy and where we go internationally in an incredibly difficult world.
People appreciate authenticity, and they don't expect that they'll agree with you all the time. And in some cases, they will disagree with you most of the time. But still, if they sense that you're being straight and honest, they will give you a lot of credit for that. And I've been blessed in Michigan not just to represent an unbelievably diverse and great and exciting state with wonderful people, But there's been a real effort made, and I give a lot of credit to the regional groups that have tried to advance the cause.
When I think about Carl, I think about being able to walk down the riverfront and the wonderful partnership and effort to make sure we've got the Riverwalk.
Regionalism in Detroit, it's essential for efficiency. It's essential, I believe, in terms of our living together as one people. We obviously, everyone in cities and suburbs are connected in all kinds of ways, factually and in the real world. Now I tell people who still see the pictures of the vacant buildings and say, you know what, that this has turned. Detroit is now got momentum, and it's real. When the economy went south and our auto industry was really in trouble, we obviously did a lot in Congress with the president to have a vibrant auto industry survive the recession.
The health care bill is something I've worked on longer and harder than anything else.
John Dingell's dad was fighting for universal health care. John Dingell, I think it was one of his first bills, was to introduce universal health care.
Health care has a triumph for the American people.
Finally, we've made a major step to end what is really shameful, that this industrial economy does not have everybody covered for health insurance.
But it's been a wonderful privilege serving here, and I have been able to finish off everything that Dad wanted to do when he was here.
Working with John Dingell in the House, and Dingell's been a leader on the things I'm going to mention now and so many other things, but there's an international wildlife refuge now, the Detroit River, which he led on, but I was his kind of co-pilot here in the Senate to get it done here.
80% of all the people in the United States now live in an urban area. Where's the next generation of conservationists and outdoors people going to come from? It's going to come from urban areas.
We've taken it from nothing, sitting in the middle of a polluted river, to now a river that's much cleaned up.
Congressman Dingell recognizes the value of clean water and the importance of the Great Lakes to the economy in our region and just human health for the citizens of the state.
And it's going to set up a new paradigm, not just to save land, but the way we save it, and also to see to it that the land that's saved is able to be enjoyed by the people.
I'm a real optimist about Detroit, and again, I was kind of maybe exaggerating for many years about my hopes being a Detroiter, but I don't have to exaggerate anymore. I think Detroit is really on a positive track. I mean, there was a recent poll about the most entrepreneurial places in the country, and Detroit's in the top 5. I say I'm truly optimistic, and the momentum is palpable.
Thanks to producer Kimberly Mitchell from the Detroit Free Press for that piece. There was also change in Lansing this year. It was a pretty competitive election season. The governor's race was tight. There's big turnover in the state house and Senate thanks to term limits. So come January, we'll still have a Republican-dominated legislature, but a lot of new faces with new perspectives. The governor will have the next 4 years to further his agenda of fixing the roads, early childhood education, and continuing the recovery of Michigan's economy. The day after the election, the governor stopped by to talk about some of his goals in his second term.
You will come back with a legislature that's perhaps more conservative than the one that's outgoing. How do you keep them on your agenda, focused on economic development and job creation and training and skills and education, and away from the issues that divide Michigan?
Yeah, well, there's larger majorities. I'm not sure how much more conservative or not, but there are larger majorities for the Republican Party. What I would say is we found great common ground issues over the last 4 years on economic issues in particular, in terms of finding ways to work together. So I want to continue that path, and again, that's why I want to be proactive in recommending an agenda. That's transportation funding we've talked about. Career tech education, I don't think anyone argues with that I can find to say this is a huge opportunity for us to improve our state. Education, I think everyone believes in education. Then it becomes a case of, you know, how do you best do that? That's why I want to focus in on the 3rd grade reading issue, dual enrollment, some of these other innovative ways to do that, and I think there's strong support there.
A large part of the campaign was focused on the economy here in Michigan and people, if they haven't felt the upturn in the economy or the slow recovery of the state. And people still, the unemployment numbers are high in the state of Michigan. What do you have in store for the next 4 years to tackle that?
Yeah, well, first of all, unemployment's higher than the national average, but we've made a huge comeback. I mean, I've said the jobs number a lot, but to put that in perspective, we're number 5 in the number of private sector jobs created in the United States in the last 4 years. We were projected to be at the bottom. In terms of growth rate, we're 13th fastest. In terms of a percentage rate, that's top tier performance. So in terms of creating jobs, it's just we started farther in the hole than anybody else. But I want us to be improved. And this is the career tech ed jobs. That's where the big ones, these skilled trades jobs. If you go to mitalent.org, you'll see about 90,000 open jobs in Michigan. Many of these are good, well-paying jobs. So that's where we need to create this pipeline of apprenticeship programs. The Matt Squared program that I've created is working great, but it's in the dozens of people. We need to ramp those up to thousands of people and create these partnerships around the state. And these are all doable things that are more common sense than anything else, and actually getting people, parents and kids, to really look at career choices in a better way, that there is this second track of great well-paying jobs for the skilled trades.
A lot of my Democratic friends are pretty despondent about your first 4 years and the fact that you won
particularly
the
this
second
morning,
4
right?
years, especially this morning. It's a pretty bitter loss. But I mean, they point to some specific things: right to work, tighter abortion restrictions, the loss of same-sex partner benefits. There's been a litany of things that seem to have changed the character of Michigan over the last 4 years. What would you say to those people about why they should be hopeful at all about you having another 4 years in the governor's office?
Yeah, well, right to work was good. I view that as actually standing up for Michiganders. I mean, we've been through this discussion before.
We have.
And it was really an environment created by organized labor that made a divisive environment. So, again, that's done. And look at this last election. Did you see right to work being an issue?
It wasn't.
It was not an issue. So that one, and in terms of some of the other things you mentioned, abortion, again, I'm a pro-life person, but the changes were not dramatic in terms of, they were incremental and I think well-placed in terms of some of the safety issues, in terms of being there. So those are the kind of things that you can look at and say, there's a lot of good things to work on. Let's focus on the positives of our urban areas in terms of, you know, our cities bringing them back. Let's talk about unemployment and how we can help the structurally unemployed get work. Healthy Michigan. I think we've done a lot for people in need in this state. Healthy Michigan is a huge success.
It is.
But we don't get to talk about other things. I mean, foster care. The adoption rate is up 25 percentage points in the state of Michigan. That's awesome. But it's still not 100%.
But you mentioned...
So this has got to be the last question, Nolan. Go ahead.
You mentioned the Human Services Department, adoptions, what have you. Maura Corrigan's done a terrific job of turning that place around, but she's leaving. How much of your current administration do you anticipate will follow you into a second term, or do you anticipate doing wholesale replacements?
No, not wholesale at all. I mean, we've had a couple people announce, Jim Haveman, Maura Corrigan, they're awesome. But this was just a natural transition. If you look at many of our folks, when they first joined me, they were expecting to probably be there less than 4 years. To be open with you, this is the greatest team I've ever worked with, and folks are fired up to keep going. So there'll be some normal transition, but the good part is we build a strong team and bench to go with them. And they're not getting away. They all want to help on projects.
Let's bring in our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley from the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson from the Detroit Free Press, to weigh in on the year that was and to take a look into the future. Merry Christmas, guys. It's good to see you.
Merry Christmas.
All right, so it was quite a year. I mean, there was no shortage of news in 2014.
I don't remember anything happening. What
oh,
are you talking
please. You were
about?
like, wait, what happened this year? And maybe sometimes it all starts to blur together a little bit.
I think
all
end
right.
of the year we just get tired. It's all overload.
You're like, let's just get to the 2015. But before we talk about 2015, let's take a look back. And I think the #1 story on everyone's list is the Detroit bankruptcy.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got out in record time. We got out with a deal that I think no one could have imagined when we filed in mid-20 or early 2013, this grand bargain, the idea of almost $800 million from parties outside the bankruptcy that had nothing to do with the case coming in to shore up pensions and save the art of the museum. I mean,
do you think we'll ever see that in any other circumstance?
I can't imagine how or when it would occur again. Everybody involved in the case says this is unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it. I'm not sure how they even worked through the legality of it. It was so unusual. So I think that defines this case in a way that nothing else does.
So does this set Detroit up now?
I think so, and I think that's the thing. Probably a year ago, we didn't fully understand. When this bankruptcy first started, we were looking at it as one mission: clean up the balance sheet, get rid of the debt. And you know, that looked like a very painful process at the beginning. I don't think anybody realized that part of the mission, a big part of the mission, would also be to set Detroit up for the future, to provide it with operating funds, to provide better services. And that's the real positive that came out of this bankruptcy.
It's a maybe positive, right? I mean, the projections are very soft, and the extra money is not nearly as much as it was earlier predicted to be,
but it's extra money, and we didn't anticipate that in the beginning. It's extra money, and services are already starting to be addressed. I mean, you're already both with more money and greater efficiencies. You know, they're not where they need to be yet, but this is the first time in my memory that Detroit, the operation of Detroit, the government of Detroit, is on an upward trajectory instead of the other way.
So you have some confidence in what could happen in the future. So let me ask you, what is that gut check? What is the feeling about Detroit?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on who you ask, right? There are a lot of people who feel like this is an opportunity, and it is to do better. There are a lot of people still waiting to see how that opportunity affects their lives. I mean, you go out in the neighborhoods and people are optimistic, I think, more than most people think, but they are also sort of wondering when's our turn? When is it going to affect the place that I live?
All right, other top story, it was the elections this year. And I think the fact that a lot of races were decided in the primary in the summertime, and the fact that the governor's race was so close here, Nolan, what does that say?
Well, I mean, it says that, what I think it says is that Governor Snyder ran a really poor campaign. I mean, he put together a bad team and he ran the campaign himself, and he took a CEO's approach to the political process. He thought his record should be enough, and the results should be enough. And, you know, if you look at it, Michigan is in an upswing. It was very rare for governors to have any sort of trouble when the economy's growing in terms of their reelection. But I think he didn't sell himself enough early enough. He wanted his work to speak for itself.
How do those election results impact what his agenda is going to be now for the next year, Stephen?
Well, I mean, I think the more important than his result is the result in the legislature where his party grew its majorities. I mean, I think he can do pretty much anything he wants to do. But he's got to deal with this legislature that's going to be more conservative. I don't think any of us knows quite what that's going to look like yet. I would hope that he would lead from the center. I mean, I think that was how he sold himself initially to voters here. Those were the things that he did early on that were the most popular. Stay away from the social issues and the more controversial stuff that the caucus, in particularly the House, is going to want to get after.
But I mean, that social stuff was never his idea anyway. I mean, that was taken to him by his caucus, and I can't imagine that's going to change. He has a more conservative caucus now. I think all of the friction in this next term is going to be between he and his caucus. But the closeness of the election, Chrissy, I think suggests another thing, and that is, as the governor noted during the campaign, not everyone has felt this economic recovery yet, and his challenge in this term is to make sure everybody feels it. We got to jumpstart job creation in the state and growth.
All right, so let's talk about 2015. If we're talking about the economy and making sure that more people feel that improvement, what else are we going to be talking about in 2015? Big ideas.
Well, I think the governor is going to be focused on education. We have, at the Free Press, really honed in on this question of what are charter schools doing and how are they governed in this state, because it's so lax by any standard nationally. We're sort of a joke on that, and the results, I think, speak to it. They are not generally much better than the public schools, which also need better governance and more accountability. I think he's going to going to get after that pretty early in the year.
Well, I don't think he's going to focus on charter schools. I'm going to think
focus on
because
both,
the failure of education in Michigan is not about charter schools. It's about public schools. It's
also about charter schools.
It's mostly about public schools, and I think he's going to focus on broad education reform. We'll see how much he's able to put in place. Michigan has been resistant to reform, resistant to bringing everybody together on one plan. We got too many education reform plans going on at once. Nobody really knows what we're doing. That's one area. Municipal finance is another. We can't have another bankruptcy, and we can't have these serial emergency managers throughout the state. They've got to figure out either how to intervene early and make sure the communities don't go off the track, or come up with a new plan for financing communities.
All right, it's going to be an interesting 2015. I know you guys will be along for the ride. So Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Enjoy the time, and we'll see you in the new year. And that is going to do it for MiWeek. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate all the time that you've spent with us this year, and hope we can continue to be the place that you turn for the best analysis of what's happening in Michigan. Thanks to our MiWeek crew for all of their hard work every week here at Detroit Public TV. We couldn't do it without you. So find us at MiWeek.org. Keep in touch during the week on Facebook and on Twitter. And for all of us at Detroit Public TV, I'm Christy McDonald. Merry Christmas. We'll see you in 2015. Take care.
Recently, Michigan's economy has begun to turn around. Michigan's gained over 250,000 new jobs. We've paid off $20 billion in long-term debt. And our population is increasing for the first time in a decade. But to make Michigan a top 10 state, there's still plenty of work to be done. Step up and help put Michigan on top. Learn what you can do at MichiganTurnaroundPlan.com.
Funding is also provided by Delta,